Hey there. So we just wrapped up our interview for She Loves and Sisters in Mental Illness, and we did sort of a retrospective for Shaley's last year and a bit, talking about mental health on She Loves.
Mm.
In case you don't know me, I'm Nichole. I'm Shaley's friend, and I'm taking over her social media here, and we're doing a little bit of an after party because there are things that I wanted to ask that weren't super professional and that are a little bit more personal. So we're just coming here and continuing the party. So as we were prepping for the interview, we were
Mm.
talking about the lies that we have to confront in order to be brave in our life. And we were talking about how one of the biggest lies in mental illness is that you're alone, that
Mm.
you're the only one. And then you made an offhanded comment about, well, then there's the second lie. I'm like, what's the second lie?
Mm.
And you talked about how that second lie is that if you start talking about your mental health, you're going to forever be one of the broken people.
Mm.
So do you want to like talk a little bit more about that and how you walk through that continually having to confront that second lie?
Yeah. Yeah, it's something that I've been thinking about and kind of learning throughout the year is that stigma is so deep. I'm not immune just because, I have mental illness. I think I was at a stage that I knew there were other people out there, um, but I wasn't sure I wanted to completely connect. And I also have trouble, like after my diagnosis, I didn't want to go to a group, like a group to talk about it, and which I really had to analyze that because, like I said, like 2% introvert, like the group seems like it would be amazing. And honestly, when I went to what I nicknamed lovely Crazy Town, which was not a psych ward, but it was an outpatient kind of clinic, but I met the best people ever. And but yeah, I struggle with being grouped, right? Especially when there's a stereotype. And that feels like I'm letting my people down. But same with, like, I've tried to join a few Facebook groups or chats, and for me personally, um, because a lot was coming up, and I feel like a lot of people maybe didn't have some support and friendships like how I can talk to you. So it was always a lot of the worst of the worst. And so it made me, it would steal my hope, and or make me feel guilty that I'm doing somewhat like well. And so I had to dig into that a little bit. And yeah, my rebellious side, I don't even want to be put into a box as, just a teacher or just a teacher. Like, I'm ridiculous about those kind of things. But I really felt like if I am hop in the bipolar box, then anybody that's on TV, then I have an attachment to that stereotype, and I have a forever understanding in people that maybe don't know anybody or maybe only see what's portrayed in the media. And I just struggle to be tethered with that. And I'm realizing now that I'm stigmatizing like myself and my peeps, and I really need to work on that. But it's also kind of like awkward to say too, right? Because I'm like, smash the stigma. Then I'm like, I carry some stigma. Like, am I supposed to smash myself? Like, I don't know. But I think that it's something that needs to be heard because it was a little bit, a little bit icky. And also, I feel like I get a lot of extra grace when it comes to talking about mental health, because I can mess up, and I say language is so important, but I can't not say like crazy. It's so ingrained in us. And someone asked me recently, like, does that hurt my feelings, or is that hard? And I think it depends what they're talking about, right? If I was like, oh, that's a crazy situation or that, but if it was like, if someone called me, it doesn't bother me that much because I use it. And I feel like I get a pass because I have mental illness about saying things, but I feel like I need to learn and I need to destigmatize my language as well. So I'm not sure if I walked around that or if I actually answered it.
No, like that is exactly it. And I think it's such an important piece of the conversation is that we talk about destigmatizing mental health, but we always look at it on an outside thing. And there's a recognition that internally we have work to do.
Yeah.
Because we are told stories that we believe about ourselves that aren't true.
Yeah.
And it's pulling those apart. What are some other things, like some other, we talked a little bit about triggers earlier too, and about like the stigma even with those, and how there's varying degrees of what triggers are.
Yeah.
And so do you want to speak into that a little bit, like as part of the stigma conversation?
Yeah, I feel like triggers are a hot button issue. See what I did there? I feel like there's levels of triggers, and I think it's beautiful that we're having trigger warnings and things like that for big trauma things to either prepare people, or if they're not ready, or so that we don't slam someone. I mean, sometimes we don't even know what those are, but I feel like I almost stutter sometimes when I say triggers, and I always feel like I have to have an explanation behind it, that it's not a trauma trigger or whatever. And I feel like I feel like a little bit like I'm betraying people that have experienced severe trauma, because I haven't had what we would consider like a traumatic incident, right? There was little things that you can consider, but like abuse, etc., right? So I think that, I struggle with the word, but because it's in our vernacular, I'm like, I use it all the time. And I don't know, I think we need to, I feel like it takes away from someone else's trauma if I'm using the word, kind of like using the word crazy and fun, right? Or like, I can't make a decision, I'm so bipolar. I feel like I'm working through right now what that means. And my fear is, what I fear happens in society is once it becomes like a word that it loses its original meaning, or like its power. The real trigger warning is a big deal. And I feel like I don't know how we can change it or what we can do completely, but you want these things to become a part of our language because that means we're talking about them, but then it leaves so much room to be misused or trivializes what you deal with, right? Like if someone says, oh, I'm so bipolar, or, or the weather's being so bipolar, it trivializes what I actually, the depth of what I actually deal with, right? Or like, oh, I like a clean house, I'm so OCD. No, you're particular. Big difference.
Yeah. And it's finding that right language. And I think you're right. It's about, I don't think that people set out to trivialize what other people have experienced, but it is becoming more aware, and that's part of it. And I know that there's like this old pastor I grew up with, and he always used to say, for every mile of road, there's 2 miles of ditch. There's ways to go off the rails on each side of the road, right? And you can go from being completely ignorant to being hypersensitive about things in this context. And so where is that middle road, and how do we walk this out respectfully? Yeah. And I think even as someone who is walking a journey in mental health, that you have to, like you said, right? Like it's sort of almost that thing that you teach people how to treat you. And so when you choose your language appropriately, then other people pick up on it. And it's not about being hypersensitive. It's about being aware that not every person who is walking a mental health journey is in the same spot either, and is able to cope with the same things that you are, and you're maybe not able to cope with the same things that someone else is. Sure. And I think that part of this destigmatizing is learning that there's not one mental health experience that fits everybody, that everybody is so unique. And I'm a mom of a kid with autism. In fact, I'm a mom of 2 kids with autism. And what I always say is, when you've met a kid with autism, you've met one kid with autism. No 2 of them are the same. Yeah. And even though I've got 2 kids who have almost identical diagnosis, they couldn't be more different in how they handle situations, because they are different human beings. And you know, you don't expect every white person to have the same experience, or every Black person, or every pastor, or every mother. Like, we have diversity for a reason, and it's a beautiful thing that God gives us. And that's why stigma sucks, is because it's putting everybody into one box.
Down the boxes. They're only for packing.
That's right. And I think that's it. And I think that, so how do you give yourself grace in your own process of destigmatizing yourself?
That's a good question. Well, I think understanding that culture and systems are ingrained within us. And I think giving myself grace and trying to give other people the benefit of the doubt is that it isn't, some people it's a choice, which is nasty and judgmental, but some people it's not completely a choice yet. They don't know different, or it's, like I said, ingrained because of media and things like that, that you know, that we judge and experience without even knowing, right? I don't know if it's something in us. And like you said, once you become aware, it's like, whoa. But before, when you weren't aware, it didn't seem like a big deal. So I'm trying to give myself grace in that I'm not messing up as a mental health poster girl by buying into or having stigmatized language or feelings. And I haven't quite mastered that yet. But
get off the interwebs if you don't have that mastered.
Right. Get out of here. But yeah, and I think the triggers and the language, and I am trying to go into conversations and enter spaces being generous, and that maybe they don't mean that. And like you said, you're not a whiner, you know, Debbie Downer, which I totally feel sorry for Debbie, by the way. Her name is Debbie.
Whoever she is, poor Debbie.
Sorry. So it's alliteration. That's it. But when I ask questions, so instead of being like, you know, I deal with this and that could be really offensive, because then that puts someone on the defensive. I try and ask questions, like if they say, oh, I'm so OCD about da, da, da. And I'm like, oh, do you have a diagnosis? Right? Or I try to not do it condescending, right? Because then it's just going to feed into, you know, oh, now we know she's bipolar and she is starting trouble. Then they're going to rebox me. And or I'm not helping. This is really hard for me, especially in certain spaces, because, and I think in spaces you've been hurt, it's harder. Mm-hmm. So I have higher expectations of people in the church and, you know, Christ followers, only because that is where my wounding has been. Also my healing. Right? But I think what I'm working on right now is exactly that. And I've been pleasantly surprised with some conversations that I've had about, I don't like calling out because it sounds like I'm better, but speaking to something that I found offensive and or insensitive. And, you know, I was ready for pushback or dismissal. And I think that giving people the benefit of the doubt, even in situations where, you know, at least I'm aware of that hurt, is a beautiful thing. And I've been, you know, pleasantly surprised by a lot of conversations and people that are open and people that contact me or comment that I assumed might judge me, you know, because I know even on the line what they post, etc. So,
well, I have to say I am really proud of you, because I know you're kind of hopping around and not wanting to out someone, but you had a really big conversation with a church leader about language that they used from the platform, and you were really brave and really respectful and asked really open questions. And what you received in response was really brave, a really open door to more conversation and learning and understanding. And I think that has to be a big takeaway, that whatever arena we're in as an advocate, if we approach the other with an open mind and an open hand and say, listen, this wasn't great, but can we have a conversation about it? Most people will be responsive. Like they end up mirroring the vibe you're sending off. So if you're going in open-hearted, what you're going to get is that open-hearted response most of the time, not always, but you did a really great job of that in that situation. And I think about how, like, this arc you're on of, when I met you, you were Shaley, the announcement girl at a conference, and you were popping up on stage doing these little announcements. And I just thought you were so fun and energetic and a little wacky, and I wanted to know you. And I went up to you and I'm like, okay, we're going to be friends. And that's just the way it is. Yeah. And what I've seen, is this arc of you having those internal nudgings that your voice was meant for more than just letting everyone know when lunch is going to be served, and figuring out how do you take your personal story and turn that into an opening for conversation that will help other people as well as it helps you. And you've done this beautiful thing of being brave and vulnerable and maintaining who you are. One of my favorite things that you said during our She Loves interview was, I wrote it down because it was beautiful. You said, I'm doing the right thing. This is my thing. And I can be my full self here. And I thought that is so empowering and so beautiful. And so I want to hear from you. We'll be wrapping this piece up right away. But I want to hear your great big Shaley dream. Like, you're doing this. And I asked you in a nice, polite way on She Loves about that. But what is that big Shaley dream that if you could make it happen, what would that look like?
That you're terrified to say out loud in case you fail. Yeah. I think I want to speak more. I want to speak more in schools and in women's events, but not just that. I want to speak more to either churches or faith communities on panels or things like that, to women and men. I found it very powerful to speak in Open Door Church. I want to possibly get paid for it.
Why is that a thing for us women?
I don't know.
I
know. But
stupid, and that's a whole nother conversation we can end up having about owning our strength and being fearless and asking for compensation for what we bring to the table. Because that shouldn't be a thing. But yes, speaking, being compensated for it, stepping out into this. Yeah. What else?
Well, and that especially, and maybe with mental health professionals as well, not because I need to be validation, but I think two together, because I think what happens is, I think that we always hear from the experts, right? That have studied and maybe not experienced it. And I think that's important. I think doing that, a lot of speaking. I think because I enjoy talking to people so much, and because I know there's a lot of people that voices need to be heard that don't want to be on video, I think a podcast is probably in the future. I just have to get it together, or like figure out the hard things. I just want to talk like into a microphone if it's someone to figure out the rest. But if I was making money speaking, I could pay someone. But also I think, okay, so this I didn't know was a dream, and I'm not sure it is, but I'm just going to put it out there. You were telling me about a documentary, and I was like, that made my insides kind of like really warm. Like, a documentary. I don't know. And like being able to use my visual and beauty stuff and organize that kind of thing, because I style photo shoots and I love that. Anyways, I don't even know why I'm saying that out loud, because I haven't thought about it past, like you said it an hour ago and I got all warm and fuzzy, but your question, maybe that. Yeah. And maybe collaborating with people. I like to collaborate with people, and I can't just wait for it to come to me. I mean, there has been some, but I think I'm going to have to put myself out there even more in that arena. So those are big Shaley dreams. I think I've told you before, my hard thing with that is that being an extrovert, and something I'm working on is going out alone, right? Or being the first one or whatever. I draw confidence from doing things more with people. And I think it's a bit about a fear of, if I fall flat, then I have someone on the ground with me, which is terrible, but.
It's not terrible. I mean, it's natural, and it is hard to be the only one. It's hard to be that John the Baptist voice in the wilderness and wondering whether someone else is out there. Because I have been that in a million ways. But I love that you're speaking, like giving voice to those dreams, and that you're saying them out loud and you're putting them out there, and that I believe in you. I believe in not just the words that you say, but who you are in the life that you're living. And I believe that these are God-given gifts and talents and desires that you have, and that in time, as you remain open and you continue this conversation, these things are going to come to pass, and you're going to have these opportunities, and you're going to make these opportunities. And it's just about staying brave. And I think that you're showing the way for braveness for other people. There's people who are watching right now, who have watched past interviews, who are speaking up because they've seen you do it. And each time you use your voice and you start smashing stigmas internally and externally, you're bringing freedom to other people. And, we're not super quote quote the Bible people, but I love that verse. It talks about it is for freedom that you were set free. You were set free to bring freedom to other people. And that's what you're doing. And it's beautiful. And I love that I get a front row seat to it. And I love that you let me play interviewer, and I get to make you answer my questions. I mean, you always answer them anyway, but this has been fun. So I really appreciate that. And if you're watching and you have a story to share, contact Shaley. And whether it's just for you to get it off your heart and share with someone, or whether something grows out of that where you might get interviewed or become part of the Shaley show on her big documentary or whatever ends up happening, just reach out to people and start sharing your story, because there's power and there's healing in shared stories. And that's what I love about She Loves, and what I love about this community and about this woman. She's all about the story.
I will answer it may take me a little bit, but I will answer everyone. And I want to turn it around and just say everybody needs a Nichole, because, like I said, having a hilarious cheerleader, and also someone that won't let me get away with believing the lies. You need to get yourself a Nichole. And you can have a piece of this Nichole, because this Nichole also writes for She Loves, if you haven't seen it, and it's starting a podcast. Woo-hoo. It's called You Should Record This, and go follow it. Pardon? No, they. What is it?
We should record this.
Because there's two of them, Karina. And anyways, go follow it, and especially there will be additions to that trigger conversation. They had that conversation, safe spaces, huge overlap. And I would like you to have a piece of Nichole, but you can't have all of her. She's kind of mean.
Thank you.
Love you, friend.
It's been fun.